Hello, my name is Robbie Fitzwater. I own and operate Marketing Rhythm. We are an e-commerce consultancy. We help e-commerce businesses with retention marketing, spending a lot of time in email and SMS marketing. And we also spend a lot of our time actually in content marketing also. Again, email and content, and again, really kind of go hand in hand. You're using email to distribute content to your audience, using content to keep the audience engaged and add value beyond the transaction. We hear a lot of questions around content when we're talking with clients and we're talking about with prospective groups. Basically, a lot of those kind of boil down to like, hey, how do we monetize that content? And how do we kind of like actually get the value out of it we want to? Or like, hey, we're going to be investing a lot of money in this content. How do we know it's going to pay off? And how can we like, again, just think about that and look at that through the lens of like return on investment for that content. So, because again, I know a lot of your guys' businesses are probably investing in some type of content, in some type of generally going to be SEO. People kind of like, again, dabble their toe in SEO first, and then we'll start to get into some other types of content through social and some other areas. But SEO is typically one of those areas where it's kind of like an easy pathway because they can see a return on investment on the other side. But we see some unique opportunities we have through email that gives us an opportunity to kind of like see how illustrate kind of how that content can potentially drive revenue quicker, and honestly, ideally, give that marketing team a little bit bigger stick and give them a little bit more insight into, hey, how is this actually going to be generating revenue? And then how can we make an argument for doing more of it because that content is going to be driving revenue? How do we get the most out of it? How do we do that quickly? And then how do we kind of think about that through a little bit different lens? So wanted to walk you guys through it, how we approach content, how we look at content, and how we think about monetization of content, because it's super important. If your content's not making money, it's not really serving its purpose, guys. So you need to be driving a financial outcome here. And that's where I want to walk you through kind of like how we look at things and how we kind of ideally are going to be driving that content revenue driving process. And then how we can make this all work together. And again, kind of, I always joke like, yeah, SEO plus email is like a 1+1=4 relationship because there's so much value to be had on the other side of that content. But again, it's going to take some time for that content to rank. And why don't we find ways to get that content to generate revenue sooner? So wanted to walk you through how we think about that and how we kind of approach that process. So for a typical business, you're investing in content and a few other areas. We like to think about that content. Hey, if you're like building an article for an SEO, you're building a blog post to drive organic search traffic on your site. That blog post is going to take, depending on your site, like 4 to 12 months before it starts ranking and actually driving a substantial amount of traffic, enough traffic to actually drive some revenue. So how do we see ROI in that content a lot sooner? And that's where we think about the email component as a distribution strategy, because we can hopefully drive revenue a little bit sooner through that email side, where we know that, hey, if we can recover that faster, it gives us an opportunity and a little bit stronger argument to be building that content pipeline and not, again, lose out on those opportunities because we don't see that quick ROI that we may need to be seeing. And we want to make sure this is seen as revenue generating activity as opposed to an activity that's going to be costing the business more and more. So say I have an original blog post and I want to be thinking, hey, we're creating this blog post. How are we going to drive the most revenue out of it? And thinking about this in a few different layers, we'll walk through this with you. So essentially, hey, if I know I have this blog post that I'm going to be publishing, how am I going to be driving revenue from it? We know, again, if this is the blog post, if it's publishing in month 1, we know that we're going to have this, again, long window of time before it's actually going to be driving revenue, again, through organic. It's going to take some time. It's going to build up steam over time, but it's going to take a little bit of time to get there. So how are we going to be driving revenue in the short term? This is where the email side of things really plays a large role, because we can understand, hey, how are we using that piece to distribute to our list, and how are we adding value beyond the transaction? So that new post, we distribute it through email. And especially if you're an e-commerce business that has like products that are like mentioned in the post, like that's a really great way to say like, hey, featured in this post are, or like, including those in your email just kind of makes sense. It's not a really heavy-handed sell, but it's like these are the products we carry that are in that post. These are our favorites for XYZ. But basically, ideally, we should be able to distribute that to our list. It's going to be adding value beyond the transaction, but one of the unique components of it is the way that it drives engagement, because typically, like, hey, we sell a lot of different things. If your sales cycle is, again, once every 2 years, once every year, great. It's going to be harder and harder for you to drive that really short-term revenue. But again, being top of mind and aware when that person is going to make that next purchase is super important, because it's so easy to go back to Amazon. So ideally, we're going to be sending to a list for that email. And ideally, because we have that data, like purchase history and segmentation data, we should be able to send that email to a really targeted, segmented list. And that's where we're adding value beyond the transaction. And hopefully we can monetize that email really fast. We see clients that will, again, generate content piece after content piece after content piece. And if we're making 5 to 10K every time we send an email, yeah, that pays for itself right away, because, hey, if we're investing like $1,000 to $2,000 in that piece of content each time, that's a quick positive ROI through our email. Again, it's not going to have that, like extremely high revenue curve in some cases. But again, if we're making like $10,000 off something that takes us $1,000, or a lot of times less than that, to actually produce in terms of content and also produce in terms of email, it's going to be a really ROI positive piece, because, hey, I'm monetizing it right away. And then I know over time it's going to be driving organic traffic in the long tail that's going to drive revenue for my business. So it just makes logical sense that, hey, we can invest in more and more content, because it's going to pay off quickly through our list and also through social. So social may not be as large. It's typically not going to drive as much actual, like, quantifiable revenue as you will see from email, because this list is a little bit more, because email allows you to segment at a little bit higher level. And again, you can send the right message to the right person at the right time. It gives a few more opportunities than we have on social. But again, we can recycle that content on social a few different times. We can also recycle it on email a few different times. But again, we want to be driving a quick pop of revenue in that first, again, from that first post that we're going to be seeing again on the other side. We also know, hey, if that's going to be valuable and going to fit in a meaningful space in our customer journey, hey, why don't we automate that? So let's take that piece of content, let's automate it into our customer journey so they get it at the right time. Like if I were buying a pair of nice equestrian riding boots, why don't we send our audience, like, hey, how to clean and care for your riding boots, like right after they make a purchase of riding boots, because that makes logical sense. And again, you're adding value beyond the transaction. You're suddenly a respected authority, as opposed to again, vending machine, an e-commerce vending machine. So you're working to create that differentiated relationship. That's going to add value over time. People may not purchase on that specific email every time, but some people may. And again, you're getting an at-bat, and you're getting ways to, again, improve that performance. And also, if you are selling like ways to clean and care for equestrian riding boots, and you sell some of those products, like that's a really easy opportunity for cross-sell. So I want to automate it because it's super contextual and it's super relevant. Let's get it in front of them. So we may automate it in that first month. It may drive 1,000 a month if we can hit that, send that to the right person at the right time, and our list is growing enough. We may have that opportunity. So in our post-purchase sequence, that article may make perfect sense. But we know that, hey, we can fit this in a few other places too. So if we can automate that into our customer journey, it adds value on a recurring basis. And that's where we can also see, again, just a little bit of a raise of our baseline revenue each month. So say this month two, we have another new post. New post number 2. Hey, we again build this. Let's distribute it through email. Again, it's going to take some time to drive traffic in the long tail over here, where we're actually capturing revenue here and driving traffic here for both of those. But when we distribute it through social and we distribute it through email, we're driving revenue right away. So we're paying for it right away, right out of the gate. And that gives us, again, more reason to build more content, and it gives us an opportunity to expand that pie. So we're developing and investing in a long-term resource here through organic, and we're also doubling down on driving revenue from it through our automations too. again, SEO and email, like they're kind of like that investing your 401k. It's not super sexy out of the gate when you're like 20 something, but when you're 60, you're really going to thank yourself. But that reoccurring, again, compounding revenue over month after month, it adds up really fast. And it's a really nice baseline that you know that you can predictably depend on because you have this coming in over and over and over. And then when it's driving long tail organic search traffic, you know that it's going to be paying for itself in a few different ways, but this gives you the latitude to take risks and experiment a little. So we add that to our automations, and we drive again a little bit more incremental revenue through our automations. So say that's like $500 a month. That doesn't seem like an extremely large amount, but over the year, that's like $6,000. That adds up really fast. So if we know that, hey, we can raise our baseline a little bit each time, it gives us more and more opportunities. So then by month 3, when we're releasing a new piece of content, again, it's going to take some time for this to rank for post 3, but again, we can monetize it right away through our efforts here. So email and then social. Sorry, my handwriting's horrible sometimes, but it happens. But we know, hey, we're going to be monetizing it right away and driving revenue from that piece. So number 3 is going to be adding a little bit of extra incremental value. And then again, improving on automations right here, where we can again move this number up. We're just gradually finding different ways to grow and grow and grow that pie. And it gives us a way of, again, justifying the investment we're making in it, but also validating it on the other side and making sure that we're going to be sending it to the right groups at the right times. And we know, hey, if we're sending this and we're testing it, we're going to be getting good feedback and good insights all the time. So we know what's going to work with our audience and what's not. We can also get really narrow in the focus there where we can understand like, hey, maybe our audience purchasing as gift givers is going to resonate differently than our audience purchasing as, again, purchasing for themselves. So we can understand what's going to be needed for those different categories. If our audience purchasing for themselves is more important or driving up more of our pie of revenue, then let's build more content for them and let's really treat them like rock stars. And that's where we can see this kind of like virtuous cycle starting to appear, where we're suddenly seeing, hey, we're driving revenue through content. We're also being able to monetize the content in different ways. And that gives us a leg up because we can suddenly do more of that as opposed to letting our content efforts fall flat 3 months in because we're not seeing a direct ROI on the other side. This gives us that chance. We want to be maximizing the content we have. I always joke and jokingly call it like, how do we use the whole buffalo? Like, let's make sure that we maximize the value of what we have. And then, like we do on social a lot of times too, if that content's relevant or again contextual, time sensitive, we can use that email again, maybe not in the next like 3 months, but in the next 6 months or next 12 months for sure. We know if we know it performs well here, again, if I'm a clothing company in the southern part of the United States and I'm selling winter clothing, I'm not going to be sending that in the summer in the southern states because it's super hot. But in the winter, I can be selling winter clothing and like justifying like, hey, this is why a winter coat does X, Y, and Z. Um, every winter, I may be distributing that same piece of content. We may polish and tweak it a little bit. Your SEO partner may be doing the same thing. But again, both of those really complement each other really well. And it gives you an opportunity to see like, hey, this has worked before. Let's play the hits. We know this is likely going to work again. So we can get more and more value over time out of it. And especially when it has like a video component or lots of other different elements, we can chop and slice that however we want to. We know, yes, over time, we're going to be seeing more and more revenue coming out of it. And we're also going to be seeing our baseline like level of revenue from automations increasing month over month over month. So when we can see these increasing, it gives us more and more, again, chances to try new things and see revenues and outcomes on the other side. So again, kind of wrapping this up into a bow. This is why we are so bullish on content, is because we see the relationship between like email marketing and content marketing and the SEO side as like a 1 + 1 = 4 relationship. There's a lot of revenue and opportunities to be had on our side, and this gives businesses that are a little bit smaller a way to differentiate, an opportunity to distinguish themselves between their competition, and ways to uniquely grow and again keep their customers coming back over and over and over. So on the retention side, that's where we really focus and put so much attention on this, is because we want to be adding value and, again, giving more than just the transactional value we have. So again, where content starts to generate revenue, it's going to be different for every business. But thinking about this from the distribution channels we have, how do we see some revenue on the other side? How do we make sure that we're going to be monetizing that in the best way possible? And then how are we able to build an argument to continue those operations? Because when something changes or when something shifts, we don't want to have marketing be the first thing cut. We want to be able to have a really strong argument around what we're doing, because that marketing is in so many ways a value center as opposed to a cost center, and we need to keep reframing it as that. So I know this is a little bit higher on the strategy side. I know this is a little bit upstream from specific email, but this is the way we like to think about things, and the way we like to be thinking about, hey, once we're actually building an email, we're not just selling stuff over and over and over. We're going to be adding value through content, and that's where we want to be driving revenue on a consistent basis, because we're not sacrificing a margin through a discount or a promotion, and we're also adding value and hopefully expanding that revenue pie for each one of those customers by educating, informing, and engaging them, and in a way that's going to be meaningful and helpful. And then again, we give ourselves more chances for success on the organic search side. So if you guys have any questions or have any insights or feedback, let me know. We're always looking for feedback, always looking for perspective. If this was totally off base, or you want to poke some holes, let me know. Again, I'm asking for feedback and perspective, because again, nobody's perfect, and I want to see what your insights are and how they play into this, again, broader marketing ecosystem. So for e-commerce businesses, keep rocking and rolling, keep using content, and if you're bored or enjoying these, make sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.